The unexpected encounter. Marcus Webb's survival pod hit the forest canopy with a bone-jarring crunch, sending him tumbling through layers of violet leaves before splashing into a shallow pool below. When consciousness returned, his head throbbed and his flight suit was torn beyond repair. The crash had shredded the temperature regulators, leaving the fabric scorching against his skin in Velthra's humid atmosphere. Stumbling to his feet, Marcus stripped off the damaged suit, tossing it onto the mossy bank. The water felt incredible, cool and silky, nothing like Earth's rivers. He waded deeper, scrubbing days of recycled air and fear from his skin, trying to process that his geological survey mission had ended in catastrophic failure. His ship was debris scattered across the cosmos, and he was alone on an uncharted world. Or so he thought. A melodic chittering made him freeze mid-splash. Marcus turned slowly, water streaming down his chest, and his jaw dropped. Perched along the pool's edge sat dozens of tiny figures, women, unmistakably feminine despite their otherworldly appearance. They stood no taller than his hand, their skin shimmering with pearlescent hues that shifted between silver and soft gold in the dappled light. Copper-colored hair cascaded down their backs, adorned with tiny flowers and crystalline beads. They wore gossamer wraps that left little to the imagination, and their large eyes, emerald green with flecks of amber, regarded him with unabashed fascination. Heat flooded Marcus's face as he sank deeper into the water, acutely aware of his nakedness. The women giggled, the sound like wind chimes, and pointed at him with obvious delight. Several whispered to each other, their gazes roaming across his shoulders and arms with an appreciation that was distinctly not innocent. One figure separated from the group, walking confidently to the water's edge. Her skin gleamed brighter than the others, and intricate silver markings spiraled up her arms and neck like living tattoos. Her eyes held his with startling intensity, and a knowing smile curved her lips. She spoke, her voice surprisingly clear despite her size, in a language that sounded like music. Though Marcus couldn't understand the words, her tone carried unmistakable warmth, and something else. Something that made his pulse quicken. The tiny woman gestured gracefully, and suddenly Marcus understood through context alone, she was inviting him to come closer. His scientific mind warred with instinct. First contact protocol demanded caution, observation, documentation. But protocol hadn't prepared him for this, for being discovered vulnerable and exposed by beings who looked at him like he was simultaneously a curiosity and something far more interesting. The woman, their leader, he assumed, tilted her head, waiting. Her smile widened, playful yet somehow commanding. Marcus took a breath and moved toward the shore, his new life on Velthra beginning in the most unexpected way possible. Learning their ways. Marcus fashioned a makeshift wrap from broad leaves, though the tiny women's amused glances suggested they found his modesty unnecessary. The leader, who touched her chest and said Ceres while pointing to herself, guided him through the luminescent forest with confident gestures. The Shimmerkin village took his breath away. Structures woven from living vines spiraled up massive trees whose bark pulsed with soft blue light. Platforms connected the dwellings, and everywhere Marcus looked, more of the tiny women appeared, their excited chatter filling the air like birdsong. Ceres led him to a clearing where a low platform had been prepared. She patted it, indicating he should sit, then clapped her hands. A procession of Shimmerkin emerged carrying platters of fruit, some familiar in shape, others utterly alien. Deep purple orbs that sparkled, golden crescents that smelled of honey and cinnamon, translucent berries that glowed from within. As Marcus ate, Ceres climbed onto his knee with surprising ease. Her weight barely registered, yet her presence commanded his full attention. She began touching his forearm, tracing small circles with her fingertips. Each touch sent unexpected warmth radiating through his skin. She spoke softly, repeating words while demonstrating. "Thessa," she said, touching her heart. Then she touched his chest, right over his heartbeat. "Thessa." "Heart," Marcus murmured, understanding. "Or, feeling." Ceres's smile brightened. She continued the lesson, teaching him basic words through touch and repetition. But as the evening deepened and the tree's luminescence intensified, the lessons became more intimate. She guided his hand down, showing him how the Shimmerkin communicated affection. A touch to the wrist meant friendship. Fingertips brushed across the collarbone expressed admiration. And when she pressed her tiny palm flat against the side of his neck, holding his gaze with those captivating eyes. He felt the meaning in his bones: desire, connection, claiming. Marcus's breath caught. Ceres. She moved closer, walking up his arm to his shoulder, her touch feather-light yet electrifying. Other Shimmerkin gathered around, watching with approval as their leader conducted this crucial lesson. Several whispered encouragingly. Ceres pressed both hands against Marcus's jaw, standing on his shoulder to reach. She leaned close, her breath warm against his ear as she whispered something that needed no translation. Then she traced a pattern down his neck, across his chest, each touch deliberate and meaningful. His hand trembled as he lifted it, extending one finger. Gently, carefully, he mimicked her gesture, running his fingertip along her arm, across her shoulder, following the silver markings that decorated her skin. She closed her eyes, a soft sound escaping her lips: pleasure, contentment. When she looked at him again, something fundamental had shifted between them. The other Shimmerkin began a rhythmic humming, and Ceres started to move, a dance, Marcus realized. Her body swayed with fluid grace, telling a story through movement. She beckoned him to mirror her, patient when his clumsy attempts made her laugh. As the 3 moons rose above Velthra, painting the forest in shades of silver and violet, Marcus found himself lost in this strange courtship. Ceres danced across his shoulders, his arms, sometimes pressing close to his chest where she could feel his heartbeat quicken. When she finally settled in his cupped palm, both of them breathing faster, Marcus knew he'd crossed a threshold. This wasn't just first contact anymore. This was the beginning of something profound. The claiming ritual. Marcus woke on a bed of impossibly soft moss, sunlight filtering through the canopy in golden shafts. Ceres sat cross-legged on his chest, watching him with patient amusement. Several other Shimmerkin women surrounded his sleeping platform, including an elder with white hair and violet markings who regarded him with shrewd assessment. Ceres spoke rapidly, gesturing between Marcus and the elder. Though his understanding of their language remained limited, he caught repeated words: ritual, bonding, choose. The elder, Grandmother Kessa, he learned, addressed him directly. Through a combination of gestures and Ceres's patient translation, Marcus understood the situation. His presence had disrupted the village's balance. To remain on Velthra, to be accepted among the Shimmerkin, he must participate in their claiming ceremony. More importantly, he must choose, or be chosen. Ceres's expression remained carefully neutral, but her fingers twisted in her gossamer wrap. She wanted this, Marcus realized. Wanted him to choose her. The ceremony would take place that night, under the 3 moons when their combined light was strongest. Until then, Ceres would prepare him. She led Marcus to a secluded grove where a natural spring bubbled up through crystalline rocks. Steam rose from the water, carrying fragrances of flowers he couldn't name. Ceres gestured for him to enter, then joined him, standing on a smooth stone at water level. The ritual requires purification, she explained in halting phrases he'd taught her of his language, mixed with hers. Body and spirit must align. She produced a small vessel containing thick, pearlescent liquid. Climbing onto his shoulder, she began smoothing it across his skin. The substance tingled pleasantly, seeming to sink into his pores and leave his skin gleaming like hers. Her touch grew bolder as she worked, no longer just instructive but exploratory. She traced the muscles of his shoulders, the lines of his collarbone, ventured down across his chest. Marcus held perfectly still, barely breathing, aware that this preparation was itself part of the ceremony, building anticipation, establishing connection. "Among my people," Ceres whispered, her voice husky, "size means nothing. What matters is thessa, heart feeling, resonance." She pressed her palm over his racing heartbeat. "I feel yours. Do you feel mine?" Marcus cupped his hand beneath her, lifting her closer to his face. "Yes," he breathed. "From the moment I saw you." That evening, the village gathered in a circular clearing where the ground itself seemed to glow. The 3 moons hung huge and luminous above, their light converging on a central platform where Marcus sat cross-legged. Grandmother Kessa began a rhythmic chant, and the assembled Shimmerkin joined in. The sound built until Marcus felt it vibrating in his chest, synchronizing with his heartbeat. Ceres appeared, adorned in shimmering fabric that caught the moonlight. She carried a crystal vial containing liquid that glowed soft amber. She approached Marcus with ceremonial slowness, her eyes never leaving his. The ritual unfolded in stages. First, the sharing of breath. Ceres climbed to his shoulder, and they synchronized their breathing until Marcus felt lightheaded, as if their very life forces were intertwining. Then came the nectar, sweet and intoxicating, which they fed to each other drop by drop. Finally, the claiming itself. Ceres danced across his skin, her movements no longer playful but profound, marking him with touches that seemed to sink deeper than flesh. And Marcus responded, his fingertips learning every curve of her tiny form, expressing through gentle caresses what words couldn't convey. When Ceres finally pressed herself against his chest, right over his heart, and he folded his hand protectively around her, the gathered Shimmerkin erupted in joyous song. Marcus had been claimed. And in claiming him, Ceres had bound her fate to his. Under Velthra's 3 moons, human and Shimmerkin became something new, something neither could have imagined, but both desperately wanted. Challenges and jealousy. Marcus woke with Ceres curled against his neck, her warmth a constant comfort. 3 weeks had passed since the claiming ceremony, and he'd begun to truly understand Shimmerkin society. But that morning, tension crackled through the village like lightning before a storm. A Shimmerkin woman he'd seen only at a distance now stood at the entrance to his dwelling, Talia, with midnight blue skin and hair like spun silver. Her beauty was undeniable, her presence commanding. She wore the ornate wrappings of a high-ranking family, and her amber eyes held cold calculation. The bonding was premature, Talia announced in their melodic language, which Marcus now understood reasonably well. The outsider should have been offered to all eligible women. I invoke my right of challenge. Ceres rose immediately, fury in every line of her tiny body. The ceremony was witnessed by Grandmother Kessa herself. Marcus made his choice freely. A choice made in ignorance, Talia countered smoothly. He knew nothing of our ways, nothing of what different bonds could offer. She turned her gaze to Marcus, her voice dropping to something sultry. I could show you pleasures Ceres hasn't imagined. My family's resources, our influence, you would want for nothing. Marcus felt Ceres tremble with anger against his skin. He carefully lifted her into his palm, meeting her eyes before addressing Talia. I chose Ceres because of who she is, not what she could offer me. That hasn't changed. Talia's expression hardened. Then you're a fool. Both of you. She turned sharply, her departure leaving uncomfortable whispers in her wake. Over the following days, Talia's campaign began in earnest. She questioned Marcus's usefulness to the community, suggested his size made him a burden on their resources, implied that Ceres had manipulated him. Small factions formed, those loyal to Ceres and her family, and those swayed by Talia's political influence. The tension wore on Ceres. Marcus would find her staring into the distance, her usual brightness dimmed. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, she finally spoke her fears. Perhaps Talia's right, Ceres whispered, so quietly Marcus almost missed it. Perhaps I was selfish, claiming you so quickly. You could have had. You, Marcus interrupted firmly, bringing her close to his face. I could have had you. That's all I wanted. He kissed her gently, his lips brushing against her entire body in a gesture they developed together, and felt her relax against him. Their moment shattered when screams erupted from the village's eastern edge. Marcus ran toward the commotion, Ceres clinging to his shoulder. He burst into a clearing to find chaos, Shimmerkin scrambling for safety as a massive creature prowled the perimeter. It resembled a panther but stood twice as tall, with 6 legs and bioluminescent stripes along its muscular flanks. Its eyes fixed on a cluster of young Shimmerkin who'd frozen in terror. The beast gathered itself to pounce. Marcus didn't think. He grabbed a fallen branch, thick as his arm and sturdy, and charged forward with a roar that surprised even himself. The creature's head snapped toward him, reassessing. For the first time in weeks, Marcus's size wasn't a curiosity or burden, it was an advantage. He swung the branch like a club, catching the predator across its shoulder. It snarled, backing away but not fleeing. Marcus planted himself between the creature and the Shimmerkin, making himself as large and threatening as possible. Get them to safety, he shouted to Ceres. She didn't hesitate, leaping down to organize the evacuation while Marcus faced down the predator. It circled, testing his defenses, and he matched its movements. When it lunged, he met it with another powerful swing, this time connecting with its jaw. The beast retreated, deciding this prey wasn't worth the effort. As it disappeared into the undergrowth, Marcus's adrenaline crashed, leaving him shaking. Ceres climbed back to his shoulder, pressing herself against his neck. Around them, the gathered Shimmerkin, including many who'd supported Talia's challenge, looked at Marcus with new respect. Talia herself emerged from the crowd, her expression unreadable. She approached Marcus, studied him for a long moment, then performed a formal bow. "I was wrong," she said simply. "About your worth. About Ceres's choice." She met Ceres's gaze. "You chose well, sister. Velthera is fortunate to have him." As the village rallied to strengthen their defenses, Marcus held Ceres close, realizing that he'd finally found his place. Not just through the claiming ceremony, but through action, through proving that different didn't mean lesser, that love could bridge any divide, and that protecting those you cared about mattered more than size, species, or where you came from. A new home, a new love. The rainy season arrived on Velthera, bringing warm showers that made the forest glow even brighter. Marcus had spent months learning Shimmerkin craftsmanship, his large hands proving surprisingly adept at weaving the living vines into structures. Under his care, the village's defenses had strengthened, walls that would deter predators without disrupting the forest's natural beauty. But tonight wasn't about defense or politics. Tonight was about celebration. Ceres adjusted the delicate crown of luminous flowers on her head, her reflection shimmering in the pool's surface. Marcus knelt beside the water, wearing a vest the Shimmerkin had crafted for him, woven from silver threads that matched the markings on Ceres's skin. "Nervous?" Grandmother Kessa asked, amusement in her ancient eyes. "Terrified," Marcus admitted. The claiming ceremony had bound them, but this was the formal union, blending human traditions he'd explained with Shimmerkin customs that honored their partnership. The clearing had been transformed. Thousands of bioluminescent flowers created a canopy of living light. Every Shimmerkin family had contributed something, woven banners, musical instruments, foods from across Velthera. Even families from distant villages had journeyed to witness this unprecedented union. Talia approached, carrying a small box. Her initial hostility had transformed into grudging friendship, especially after Marcus had designed irrigation systems that benefited her family's orchards. "For Ceres," she said, offering the box. "My grandmother's marriage crystal. She would have wanted your bond to carry our people's history." Marcus accepted it with gratitude, understanding the significance of the gesture. The ceremony began at sunset, when all 3 moons were visible in the twilight sky. Ceres emerged, and Marcus's breath caught. She wore traditional bridal wrappings of pure white that made her skin shimmer like starlight. In her hands, she carried a single flower, large by her standards, tiny in his, that she'd cultivated specifically for this moment. They met at the clearing center, where Grandmother Kessa officiated. The ceremony wove together traditions from 2 worlds. Marcus spoke vows in Shimmerkin, promising to honor Ceres's people and protect their ways. Ceres responded in the halting English he'd taught her, pledging to walk beside him through all of life's challenges. When it came time to exchange tokens, Marcus produced something he'd worked on in secret, a ring sized perfectly for Ceres, carved from a crystal he'd found near his crashed pod. It caught the moonlight, refracting it into rainbow colors. Ceres gasped, tears glittering in her eyes as he gently slipped it onto her finger. In return, she gave him the flower, which he tucked carefully behind his ear, earning affectionate laughter from the gathered crowd. But the most important moment came next. In Shimmerkin tradition, the bond was sealed through the Thessalinking, a meditation where their heartbeats synchronized completely. Ceres climbed onto Marcus's chest, pressing herself over his heart, and together they breathed, felt, existed as one being. The gathered Shimmerkin fell silent, witnessing something sacred. In that infinite moment, Marcus felt what Ceres felt, her joy, her love, her absolute certainty that they belonged together. And she felt his wonder, his gratitude, his fierce devotion to her and her people. When they opened their eyes, the clearing erupted in celebration. Music filled the air, drums, flutes, and voices raised in songs that had celebrated Shimmekin unions for generations. Now those songs included verses about the Tall One and his tiny bride, about love that transcended worlds. The feast lasted until dawn. Marcus sat cross-legged, Ceres dancing across his arms and shoulders, pausing frequently to press her face against his skin in gestures of affection. Friends and family came to offer blessings, to share stories, to welcome him fully into Shimmekin society. As the first moon set and the second climbed higher, Ceres led Marcus to their dwelling, enlarged to accommodate his size but decorated with her touch throughout. Soft mosses cushioned the floor, bioluminescent vines provided gentle light, and a platform at shoulder height gave Ceres easy access to him whenever she wished. She stood on that platform now, level with his face, and cupped his cheek with both hands. "My heart," she whispered in English, the words still unfamiliar on her tongue but heavy with meaning. "My heart," Marcus echoed in Shimmekin, understanding finally complete. They came together in the privacy of their home, exploring the intimacy they'd built over months of learning each other's bodies, each other's desires. Every touch was a conversation, every caress a promise. Sighs meant nothing when hearts resonated so perfectly. Later, as Ceres slept curled against his neck and Velthra's night symphony played outside, Marcus reflected on the strange path that had led him here. His geological survey had failed spectacularly, his ship was debris, his old life gone forever. But he'd found something infinitely more valuable. A home. A people. A love that proved the universe was far stranger and more beautiful than he'd ever imagined. Through the window, he could see the distant stars, Earth somewhere among them, impossibly far away. He felt no longing for return. Everything he needed was here, sleeping peacefully against his heartbeat, her tiny hand resting trustingly on his skin. Marcus closed his eyes, Ceres's warmth a constant comfort, and dreamed of the life they'd build together. Of children who would bridge two worlds, of discoveries yet to come, of love that would echo through generations of Shimmekin stories. He'd crashed on Velthra expecting nothing but survival. Instead, he'd found his forever. And in the morning, when Ceres woke him with gentle kisses across his jaw, when she smiled up at him with those captivating emerald eyes and whispered plans for their day together, Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he belonged. Home, at last, in the smallest embrace that held the biggest love.